When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower-cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the U.S. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP Works Wonders.
Sonoro. Hi, Tamarindo listeners. Today's guest is Betsy Aimee Cardenas, a purpose-driven entrepreneur, producer, writer, and creative marketing expert who has dedicated her career to championing the Latinx community through various advocacy efforts. Betsy has also produced 2 podcasts for iHeart Radio, Out of the Shadows, Children of 86, and Rep, a story about the stories we tell. Betsy and I reflect on the outcome of the last election, what Democrats can learn from it, and how we can all grow our movement together, rooted in empathy and inclusion. Before we start the show, I want to ask you to please take a few minutes to rate and review Tamarindo on whatever platform you're listening on. Your reviews and support is what keeps this podcast going. I also want to invite you to support Tamarindo with a contribution. Putting on this podcast for the past 8 years has been an absolute blast, but it requires unpaid time and resources. You will find a link to many ways that you can support our show by going to tamarindopodcast.com/support. Welcome to
Tamarindo Podcast,
hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a fitness coach, political nerd, and nonprofit capacity builder.
and me, Delsy Sandoval, a Guatemalan-American licensed therapist and passionate creativity advocate. Together, we're here to uplift our community through powerful conversations with changemakers, creatives, and healers.
Each week on the pod, we talk politics, culture, and personal development. Listeners call Tamarindo the Advocacy and Self-Love Podcast. Vámonos!
Let's start the show.
Welcome, Betsy. It's so good to have you back on Tamarindo.
Hi, Brenda. How are you?
I'm excited that we get to chat. Thanks for hanging out with me this Valentine's Day that we're recording on Valentine's Day. So first, we like to do a little temperature check. And how are you doing? How are you doing, given the state of everything?
I have been trying to lean on a few realities that even when things seem hopeless, we have a lot of historical examples that things can get better. We have a lot of examples of people who have resisted, and we have a lot of examples of how community will come out to bat for one another. And so I'm trying to lean on what I call these glimmers of hope, given everything that is going on around us.
That's awesome. Well, more power to you. I definitely have been feeling really down and low on energy, but I think that's a really great reminder and a great place to stay grounded, is to remember all that. Now, I know there's like 100 billion things to be furious about. And what the listeners don't know is that you and I all day long are like sharing things on social media. I'm like, oh my God, this happened. And oh my God, that. And we were very much aligned in terms of what enrages us. The list is long, but let's try to zero in on just one thing, which is that something that, something unique to you that's different from me, is that you're a parent. You're a parent. And so I want to know, among the billions of things that are being thrown at us every day, what's it been like as a parent specifically?
Well, first, I think it varies by how old your children are. My son is 11 years old and very astute and sensitive to what's happening around him. And so I think that this has been the first time that I have to try to explain our political, historical moment to a child that is gaining an understanding of the world that is now a little bit different, that he understands that me saying it's going to be okay, that's not the full scope of the reality. And so that's something new that I'm grappling with. This is different during COVID when he was little. And to think about those of us who are raising young kids, like we've now been through COVID, we are now, I think, facing potential cuts to our Department of Education. My son is on the autism spectrum. And so we are also, I think, under the gun of really watching a lot of protections for disabled people like my child, a lot of protections for children who require special accommodations. We're really scared and wondering like how this is all going to pan out. And so there's a lot of rage, there's a lot of frustration. And I think we also had the wildfires here in Los Angeles. So that it has been, I mean, man, you asked me how I was doing. And I think right now I felt that way, but there's other times of the day or even last night, or it just changes because we have been through trauma on top of trauma. And I would say that from the moment the election happened, I just have not been the same. And so it has been a challenge at times to really keep a semblance of normalcy for children, which is something that we have to do as parents. So in a way it's hard. And in another way, it forces me to just like not doom scroll all day, because there is a very palpable reason why I have to keep going and why I have to find the positivity. And I think it's an opportunity for me as well to talk to him about what our values are as a family and who we want to protect, and thinking about really vulnerable people like our immigrant populations, thinking about seniors and people who are going to be directly impacted, and speaking to our kids about what our values are. I think sometimes people don't want to talk to their kids about politics, but I always say like politics and how you vote is an extension of your values and an expression of your values. So it's really about love in action, right? And so I think that it's never too early to talk to your children, read to your children, you know, even if they're eradicating the public honoring of Black History Month, nothing is stopping us yet from reading to our children about these topics. Right. So I think that there is something about what we can control. And I think our homes, for those of us raising children, is a place where we can have a full expression of our compassion, our progressive values, whatever those may be. Yeah. So I think that's an opportunity that we have as parents. And that's not to say it's not incredibly difficult. I mean, listen, when to your point, there's just so much to be frustrated and angry and sad about. Losing environmental protections at a time when we know we're at a clock that's running out on climate change, it's incredibly concerning. And, you know, we're both around the same age. So I think for us millennials, it's like the world has seen every situation that we thought was either once in a generation or was like never going to happen. And we have just been hit over and over with those types of scenarios in our lifetime. So, I mean, it's tiring.
Oh my God, yes. Yes, millennials, if you're listening, which I know a lot of you are millennials that are listening, wow, we've been through it, right? We've been through it.
I mean, it started with 9/11, and it's just been
one after the other.
Economic crash, COVID, you know, it's really been a lot. And I think, I guess it speaks to our resilience that we've continued to go and we've continued on creating, and we don't have much options, right? We don't have many options. What are we going to do?
Aquí seguimos. You know, I really like that you talked about talking to your child, like not shying away from referencing what's happening around the world and doing it using it as an opportunity to express your values. Because I've actually had this experience where I've met with some of my girlfriends that are politically we're aligned, all of that. Two of them specifically that have teenage children that voted for Trump, or that one of them couldn't vote. She's young, she's 16, but that was like literally in the family group chat celebrating Trump's victory in her all Latino group chat. And then another friend of mine who's a grown kid decided to vote for Trump. And it's like, even though they have mothers that are very active, very involved, it's just really scary out there, because we're losing them even within our own roof, right? Within our own roof. So I love that you are starting young, like not shying away from reinforcing those values.
One thing that I, as someone who works in digital and watches the media, the social media ecosystem, one thing that I've been sounding the alarm about for a while is the fact that the content creators on the right have had a lot much more investment put into them, and they are everywhere, and they're not necessarily like it's like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is not a political podcast, but he interviews people of all walks of life, and there is definitely a point of view that we saw has become a political expression. And so I think a lot of young people who are spending increasingly a lot of time online are being exposed to a lot of right wing or ultra right wing content. And so I think there is a lot of young hip influencers, whereas before it was like being ultra right, that wasn't like a cool hip thing. But now there is a whole new ecosystem of content creators that are perceived to be young and hip. And for boys especially, there is a lot of content that is around this ultra like macho expression of masculinity. And some of that content is in places where we're not spending a lot of time as adults, like Twitch conversations, video game chat rooms. And so I think that as parents, we have to really teach our kids digital literacy around misinformation, disinformation. And then I think on a larger scale, I think that our progressive movement or our progressive causes or candidates, however you want to refer to it, I think that we have to make a much bigger investment into understanding where young people are hanging out online and really putting money into content creators in a different way. I mean, you work in podcasting, you see how that investment just is not being made on, if you want to call it sides, that investment is not being made in the same way. The other side has really capitalized on that.
Yeah.
So I'm not super surprised that a lot of young people are being attracted to. Also, young people, they don't have, you see it here in California, like there isn't that same party loyalty that once existed, where like, I vote for the Dems no matter what. They are much more likely to think of themselves as nonpartisan, as not belonging to either party, and really voting more across on issues. So it's like, oh, he really spoke on this issue or she really spoke on that issue, and that's what I care about. They're much more likely to analyze or judge each candidate based on a specific issue and less on party affiliation or loyalty.
Mm-hmm. And also, I just think that one of the challenges is that to really the way that they're cutting through, you're right. They're in places where we're not, where we maybe are not, and also as parents have to be more vigilant because 20, 30 years ago, those places didn't even exist for us to get influence, right? There's so many more things funneling that information. So we have to be more vigilant on how to protect our those little tender brains. But I think the other thing that's happening is that the messages on the other side are simple and they don't require much critical thinking. And so when you have an electorate that is not as informed, or when you have education system that is not emphasizing critical thinking and instead teaching to the test or whatever, it's so much easier for those very simple messages to cut through versus our very thoughtful, multi-layer messages that we can't just cut through. It's like so many things against us.
It's absolutely right. And I started getting a little nervous about the presidential election specifically. I started getting a little nervous because I was on TikTok and there was just video after video of really young women with families just talking about how they believed that the candidate that ended up winning, that he was going to lower the cost of living for them, to make homes more affordable, to make it so that if they wanted to stay home, they could afford to. And so I think that that is a product of misinformation, disinformation, and sometimes people's lack of understanding of how things actually work, of how our economy works. And listen, no disrespect to anybody, but when you look at the stats that a large percentage of our population has a very low literacy rate, as a parent, that tells me that I cannot rely 100% on the school to take on my child's education. And so I have to supplement that. So we have so many books about history. We have so many books about what they used to call social studies when we were little.
Do they call it something else now?
I personally, I would say that my experience has been that they receive very limited education on those topics. So it's very surface level. So I think it's really up to us to teach some of the more deeper information and provide access to that information and those resources and cultivate that. And I think that that's something that we have to just, our education system is not perfect. And my fear is that it's about to get, with so many banned books, that the information is about to get even more restrictive. And so I think it's up to us as parents to really invest and cultivate and make it a habit of taking your kids to the local library, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners with children already do this. Tamarindo listeners are very smart and apt folks. But I think definitely as someone who works in digital media, I will say that being aware of what's out there and how content is being manufactured and delivered to young people, that's definitely something for us to think about and talk to our children about, what messages they're receiving online, and who they're listening to, and who do we consider experts now? Having 100 million followers, does that make you an authority on every subject? Or does that mean that you're just like a popular person?
Yeah. We have to quit translating followers and money with expertise and intelligence, credentials. Yeah.
There's some wild stuff on the internet. I mean, I've been following this trend of trad wives, and I saw something the other day, and it said, I don't listen to experts, I follow my intuition. And it was in reference to vaccinations and healthcare. And listen,
my intuition tells me you're a pendeja is what I want to say to those people.
It's like, listen, I'm all about intuition. I'm all about the law of attraction. But I mean, as someone the other thing is, as someone who has a child with autism, I am severely concerned about the level of misinformation that's being put out there about, vaccines and autism. Like studies that have been, a study that has been continuously discarded by experts over and over again. I'm severely concerned about the misinformation going around, and also about the ableism, right? Because when you're saying, I don't want to vaccinate my child because they might get autism, you're saying that you would rather have a child that could potentially die of an infectious disease than have a child with autism. And I think we need to be aware of when people with autism or people in the community, people who love people with autism, which is almost all of us, know someone or know someone who knows someone. I think it's a harmful message that we're sending to people. And what families with autism, or someone's experiencing autism, they need resources, they need information. They don't need misinformation and misguided advice that sends a really dangerous message about what role do people with a disability or a neurological difference have in our society. And that's something that I would say that's one of my top 5 things that I'm really nervous about.
Yeah. Very powerful things that you're saying there, that it's you're showing your ableism when you're so concerned about autism that you're willing to put your child's life at risk and everybody else's child's life at risk, that you'll take measles or that you'll take polio. That's really concerning. All right. I know you and I could get our rage up as much as possible all day long, and maybe we'll keep doing it just one more. I have a couple more questions kind of in this vein here. So, you've already alluded to your expertise in messaging, right? And we kind of talked a little bit about some of the threats that we're facing from the other side. If you were, if you were in the room with them, right, with the Democrats, with the Democratic leadership, we already know they need to be investing more. They need to be in the places where people are getting information, like TikTok, like video games even. There's so many places that are beyond the traditional media. But also, what is the message? There's a failure of, we weren't able to cut through, they were able to cut through. What are some ideas, some strategies? How can we cut through?
That's a really big question. I'll speak a little bit about Latinos, because I think Latinos was a really big topic that came up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one thing that we have been focusing on a lot is we have been focusing on, more Latinos voted for Trump. A few things. Latinos, still a majority of them voted for Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So there was definitely gains, but it wasn't some kind of overwhelming swoop that he did. And I think that's a misnomer. And I think that sometimes our friends in the media like to hang on to these like really sticky sound bites. And the rest of us just read a headline and then move on. It's like, it's like everyone's voting for Trump. Like, it gives this sense of invincibility to this person. And that is something that I really want us to challenge, that there is not a mandate. There is not an overwhelming majority. So if I was going to tell the Democratic Party something, and I probably have said things to operatives that I've encountered, is 3 things. Latinos are not a monolith. Latinos from Miami are not Latinos from Los Angeles. There's generational differences. And the thing I would say the most is like, there needs to be a significant long-term investment, regardless of who's running, regardless if it's an election year or not. There needs to be a really long-term investment into the Latino vote if they want to keep thinking of the Latino vote. And like I said, young people, they're less likely to vote based on party affiliation. So there really needs to be honest conversations. And I've seen a little bit of that happen over the last few weeks, with a lot of Democrats going back home or virtually holding a lot of town halls and really listening to, like, what do people want? What do people actually care about? What are some of these, like, top issues? Not us assuming what the top issues are for people, but really understanding, especially for young people. I would tell a Democratic Party, you need to invest in young people. You need to invest in Gen Z and really understanding what their needs and thoughts are. One thing that I felt very strongly about was that we need to be able to tell the difference between both political parties. And listen, I am one of these people who feels like we need to have more than 2 parties. If we get anything from this, is that maybe if we have a chance to build something new, I think we need to either build a true progressive coalition, or we need multi-parties that represent different factions within the movement. Because to your point, Republicans tend to fall in line a lot more and just like get behind their guy. They're doing it now.
Yeah.
Whereas on our side, there's like, well, what about this? And what about me? And what about me? And that's part of what makes us like a multi-ethnic, diverse group of people that is fantastic. But it's really hard to govern in that way. It's really hard to run elections in that way. I think that, on immigration, which is an issue that I also care about a lot, like sometimes you couldn't tell the difference between one party and the other.
Mm-hmm, right.
And I think that's a misnomer. And I think that's why a lot of people stayed home, because if you can't tell the difference on certain key issues between one party and the other, there's less of an incentive for me to come out to vote. And I think there's been a lot of Paola Ramos wrote a great book. You should have her on. She wrote a great book called The Defectors.
Oh, believe me, I've tried to have her on. It's not for lack of trying.
And she specifically wrote a book about the ultra right, because it's one thing people who just like, I guess he sounded like an okay guy, and there's other people who like, if this is like an ultra right wing.
These people are in a cult. These people are all in a cult. They're in a cult.
They're in a cult. I'm trying to be diplomatic, and she's saying it how it is, right? Like, so there is a faction that it's like it's ultra right wing, and Paola Ramos writes about that. So I think if you want to know more about that faction, but I'm talking about folks who just like didn't show up. And why didn't they show up? Because I believe if we could convince even half of the Latino electorate that did not show up, I do believe that we would have had a much different electoral outcome. And there's so much to tease out. But you told me, what would I tell the current Democratic Party? I would say really invest in the ecosystem of young people in a genuine way. A lot of Latino men voted for Trump, and the highest percentage that voted for Trump was young men under 40. I I do think this is like a lot of kids who were maybe Bernie bros who then, got into like the Joe Rogan kind of like entrepreneur, like fitness, wellness movement, and ended up being convinced to vote for this other person, even though he stands against so many other people in our community. And listen, I had conversations with folks in my family who were not for Trump, but were also saying some egregious things about recent immigrants. And I think that there is so much work to do within the community to, I think, resist the urge to separate ourselves, to not think that, oh, people who are coming here now, they're different from me, and they they have different needs, or they're different, or our generation was better. I had an uncle who told me that ellos no vienen como nosotros. They don't come like we did. They don't come here just to work. They come here like expecting things. I believe was people from South America and Central America, which is funny because I'm half Central American. So I feel like I'm privy to how that journey of immigration is different for people in Central America. But I think that that's something that we have to really work on, that Paola Ramos talks about in her book, about the generational differences and how one batch of immigrants will immediately feel that push to assimilate, and then they're like, well, we're better, or we're different, or it's not the same. They shouldn't come here and we should come here. And I think that that's why this is so complicated, because we have to work to build unity within ourselves as Latinos. And then we also but meanwhile, we have this huge, I don't even know what the word is, like this huge dehumanization effort that is being normalized. Because at the end of the day, whether or not you support him, he is a racist. And if you look at people who are surrounding him, Gina Aguirre wrote a fantastic book a few years ago about Stephen Miller, who is someone who is orchestrating a lot of the inhumane immigration policies that we're seeing come out of the administration. The book is called Hate Monger, if you want to check it out. And, there is no other way to say it, that there is a desire to eliminate Latinos.
Immigrants that are not white, basically. Immigrants that are not white. Because, this anti-immigrant language is not about immigrants generally. It is very specific. It's anti-Indigenous. It's anti-Black. It's anything that's not white. Yeah, it's a very, very targeted assault.
Yeah, and I think that we all have to reflect on, number one, how did this happen on our watch? Or, how did these ideas that used to be really fringe ideas? I mean, the idea of saying ending birthright citizenship, that would have gotten you kicked out of even the Republican Party 20, 30 years ago. I mean, for listeners who are so young to remember, like in 2006, like George W. Bush, he was advocating for a comprehensive immigration policy.
I know. I mean, this is how bad Trump is, that we are all looking at Bush with loving eyes. I would much rather have him. This is how disastrous this is.
I mean, my mom always laughs because one time George W. Bush said that history would redeem him. And I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? He started a war, based on lies. Dummy.
He's such an idiot.
Yeah. And I'm like, what is he talking about? And I'm like, in a twisted way, I just did not expect. But a lot of the seeds of the issues we're having now were there. There was already a nativist movement within the Republican Party at that point. There was already,
yeah, it's the Tea Party. The Tea Party basically has taken over.
Merged.
Yes.
The Tea Party merged, and there's if we want to take anything from them, is that it is a faction of groups that seemingly have nothing in common that have coalesced for a common goal. And there is something to be said on the progressive side that we could learn from that we don't necessarily have to have everything in common and fall in line together on every single issue to get together and have a win. Because with the seeds of the evangelical movement and everything that were already there, and those have now become some of the dominant factions within the Republican Party that have essentially taken over. And so I think that, and to give comfort or more discomfort, this isn't just happening here in the US. There is a global increase in this idea that if we elect a strong man as our leader or a strong man president, that they are going to save us and they are going to solve everything for us. And I think that is a really dangerous road for us to take, because what's on the line is a lot of the progress that we've made over the last 100 years as a society. And I know that progress hasn't benefited everybody equally, but I think one of the things that I am still grieving, frankly, is that not only are we not going to gain anything, we're losing things. We've lost things on reproductive rights. We're losing things on the environment. We're losing ground on a lot of issues. And I have made peace with myself that we have to stay in the fight, even if we don't see the end, even if we don't see it, even if like we just pass the baton to the next generation, because I don't know how long it's going to take us to get back what we have lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something I'm grappling with pretty much daily.
Yes, you and me both, and everybody else. Okay, so let's. There's so much that we need to work on, but I want to try to summarize. There's a lot, right? There's a lot, but I think what I'm hearing is that we really need to build solidarity. We need to build, see each other within our movement. We need to get away with the division, and it really goes back to like looking at it as communal, like we're in this together, and it's not about me. That's the problem, is that there's a very individualistic lack of empathy on the other side, and we need to remember that it's empathy and working as a community and lifting each other up together that's going to inspire folks to get engaged and get reconnected. There was a lack of inspiration in the last round, or not enough inspiration. Other side was inspired by lies, but we have to just see how we can go back to sowing those seeds of solidarity across our movements so that we can protect our gains. So much to do. All right, luckily, you and I live in Los Angeles, and I had a chance to see Mayor Bass at an event not too long ago. This was before the fires. And she said, this was before the fires, but after the election. And she was saying, like, listen, y'all, we live in such a bubble. Like, we're already in California. That's a bubble. We are in LA. So we're in a double bubble. But when she goes out there and is engaging with other mayors and like engaging in other states, I mean, it's bad. It is truly bad. So we're lucky that we're in LA, we're in California. There's definitely some bright spots. So I know that you're involved in a lot of different efforts through your work. So is there anything that you're seeing that is giving you some hope here in LA, for instance, that maybe other regions could learn from?
I think we do have a sense of community and solidarity here. You're seeing it now with people sharing information around protecting your rights and making sure that all of our immigrant community is informed of what their rights are in the event that there is like massive raids happening in our city. So I think you're seeing that there. You mentioned the fires, and I think the fires were an example of how LA, even though people across the country and across the world have their own ideas about what LA is and what Angelenos are, you saw how Angelenos turn out for each other. We really saw an outpouring of support and community building that is ongoing. People were giving their time, giving their money, and giving their resources for each other, for their neighbors, even if they weren't directly in the areas affected by the fire. I think everybody was showing up and showing out in a really significant way. And I think Los Angeles is an example of why multiracial democracies can and do work. And listen, we're a city with a lot of issues. You and I have worked on some of these issues together in the past. Like, we have a lot of issues, but at the end of the day, I feel like we are an example of how a city can thrive and can exist with people of different ethnicities, of different belief systems, religious. I think we're an example for the country and for the world of how that is possible. And I think that gives me hope. I think that what has given me a lot of hope is seeing how young people have been protesting. I think Angelenos love shutting down a freeway, and we've seen that happening over the last few weeks. Like, even in the middle of everything that's going on, people are still showing up. And I think that gives me some hope that people are aware and people do care. And I think what we're about to see is that people do care and people are willing to fight for each other, even if they may not want to fight for the Democratic Party, but they will show up and fight for each other and for their community. And I feel like we've seen that here in LA since the inauguration and since the fires, and we'll probably continue to see that. And I also think that we've seen that across the country. I know that maybe this hasn't been part of like the mainstream media news, but there has been protests in every state of the union. There has been protests around the world about what's going on in the world. So I think that sometimes, and I work in digital media, sometimes when we are alone scrolling our phone at night, it does feel lonely. And so what I want to encourage everybody is like, we have to spend more time with each other. We have to, this sounds really cheesy, but we have to get to know our neighbors. We have to get involved in like the local club or the local pickleball league, whatever it is I will not do pickleball, but if that's what you want to do. I think I've also been trying to do like more spontaneous hangs with people. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, you want to go to a movie? Hey, you want just being around people more and being in community with people, I think is going to be something that's going to be really important. If not, and listen, I have a lot of Cancer energy, astrologically speaking. And so Cancers, we tend to like to go into our shell and be really comfortable. And I am really pushing myself to fight that tendency of comfort, because we need each other and we need to be together. And that was not an answer to the question, but sorry, I went off on that tangent. But
no, I think you gave us so many bright spots about LA, and also gave us some reminders about the importance of feeding that need to be communal. Goes back to like the things that we need. We need to see each other, you see ourselves in each other, and build that solidarity. I want to shift gears and play a game. So, because you and I are both, as much as we are fascinated by politics and policy, we are also into pop culture, and there's a little bit of both in this list.
Okay, cool.
So I'm going to read a list for you, and you're going to tell me whether you think it's a basura or a matraca, something to celebrate or something that you're done with or you think is trash.
Okay, go.
All right, here we go. The movie Challengers getting 0 Oscar nominations. Is this a basura or a matraca?
That's basura and bisexual erasure.
Yes. Okay. I freaking loved this movie. Yes. I know that you like this movie. I feel like I
loved it too.
Didn't get as much love as it needed. Now that we're not talking about it during the award season as much.
The soundtrack alone, like I had never seen a soundtrack be utilized in the movie in that way, at least not in recent memory. So I think that alone deserves some kind of merit. And come on, Zendaya, come on.
Yeah, it was hot. It was interesting. I'm still quite not sure what happened at the end. I'm trying to work through the ending.
That I think is part of the appeal of the movie.
Yeah, it's supposed to leave you like, I don't know. All right. I don't know if you watch this show, so I guess whether you watch this show might influence your answer here. But basura or matraca, the show Severance. Are you watching this show?
Oh. Okay, I've seen season 1 and I give it a matraca. I haven't watched it because it's scary and a little dystopian, and I feel like I am in need of balancing that with our current reality. But yes. I will give it a matraca. I think you should check it out.
Yes. Well, I watched the first season. I'm watching the middle of the second season, and I'm thinking matraca to the first season, I guess. I'm just like, I don't need it to go any further. I need this shit to end. I need to know what the fuck's going on. It's a little too much, but you're right. It's sort of a damper mood.
You know what a basura is? How long we have to wait in between seasons of some of these shows, because then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that show.
Right. The Last of Us. Hello. But what is bringing you joy? Is there anything that you're watching, reading, listening to that is bringing you matracas?
So this is very, very niche. So you and I both grew up in the early 2000s, where every girl in a rom-com worked in publishing or fashion or PR.
Right, and somehow they had an amazing apartment.
So there is a perfect show for this. It's called Younger. It just came up on Netflix. It's a few years old, but it's called Younger, and it's about a woman who is in her early 40s, but pretends to be 26 so she can work in publishing. And I feel like it has so many like nostalgia. Number one, it's like, it's all about Twitter when Twitter was like not a scary place. There's Hillary Duff in it. So there's like a lot of millennial nostalgia, like fun, easy vibes to the show. And that is what I am craving in my life because my work is serious, like parenting, everything feels really serious and heavy. So I am definitely looking to light. So I have been watching younger, even though I saw the first season when it aired, but I've been watching, and it's 7 seasons, which is amazing because then it's like, oh, my weekend is full now.
Okay, Netflix keeps feeding that one in my, keeps saying you should watch this, you might like this, so maybe it's time for me to listen. Okay, here's a little bit of recent news. It kind of goes back to politics again, but here's what it is. So Florida recently did away with their in-state tuition for undocumented students. This law was first championed in 2014 by then State Representative Janet Nunez, Republican. She did the right thing, 2014. But now, as Florida's lieutenant governor, she said, oh, okay, that law has run its course. I changed my mind. Of course, she's a Republican, Cubana. All right, is this a basura or a matraca?
That's obviously basura because investing in our young people's education, that's always a good investment. It's good for the economy and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And listen, there's so many people who are potentially on their path to becoming residents or citizens. It just is such a waste of everybody's time to have educated someone in our community and then to not allow them to continue getting educated and then earning a good paying job and contributing to the economy. It's just so silly. It's so silly.
Also, for what it's worth, even the most anti-immigrant folks tend to support the dreamers, and they tend to support young people who were raised here and have been here and are, making a living, and trying to make a living and trying to make good of themselves. Like most people support that common sense, type of policy. And that's like another thing that's lost in the conversation. Like most people, when you really ask them, like they don't want their neighbor who's been here for 30 years, like shipped off and separated from their family and shipped to Guantanamo. Nobody wants that.
No, absolutely
not.
I
think that's getting lost in the conversation. There is no overwhelming support for those kind of policies.
Yeah. And I really wish that they would just they're like, stand in line, make the line.
There is no line. Just Google it, guys. There is no line.
Yeah. Sometimes I fantasize for these Republicans. They're so anti-immigrant that the problem is so massive that they've created in their imaginations that I almost feel like they might even, this is my very hopeful prayer, that they'll just be like, okay, you know what? Legalize them. That they'll literally say, I don't want undocumented, I don't want illegal immigrants. Let's make them legal. That's like my crazy.
Right. I hate their status so much that we're just going to adjust it for them to get rid of the problem.
That's my fantasy. All right. Back to softball questions here. Pan dulce with cafecito, basura or matraca?
Obviously matraca.
And what kind of pan dulce do you like?
Oh, I like orejitas.
Me too. My faves.
And I love conchitas because they remind me of my grandma's, and then they remind me of my son likes them too. However, also tamal con cafecito is good, like a reheated tamal from the night before or something, like with the cafecito in the morning. That's also my favorite.
A savory tamal or a sweet one?
Either one.
All right, very good. All right, last one here. Flare jeans making a comeback. Basura or matraca?
I'm going to go with matraca. Kendrick copied me. I already had a pair of flare pants. They were not Celine's. They were from the Gap. But I do like them. And it actually took me a long time to convert to skinnies when they first came out because I was always like a boot cut flare girl. So I have really been embracing my middle school, high school days. When they would get wet at the bottom because they were so long. I'm not doing that, but there definitely is a little bit of nostalgia for them. Yeah. And I think the pants almost stole the show from Kendrick. They were really, he and I are about the same height, so the pants kind of fit me the same. So I was like, I think he copied me.
Yeah. The only thing I don't want is I don't want them to be like low rise, Like I don't want that part I can't.
Okay. That part you know what? It was fun. We'll let the youngins take that one because I'm not going to do a low rise flare.
No,
I will do a mid I worked at the Gap in my retail days. So I had like every cut of jean and every wash available. But yeah, I will not be doing I used to wear these ultra low rise.
No.
So bad. I will not be doing that. I will not be participating in that trend.
No, thank you.
But otherwise, I would say matraca to the flares.
Love it. Okay, is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with as we wrap up our conversation today?
I want to say keep supporting Tamarindo podcast because everything we've talked about has really been about how we need to support content like this that is educational, fun, engaging, informative. Is about pop culture, but also gives like legitimate, real information about topics and sharing it with your friends. And I think that there's been a lot of conversation about people leaving Meta or not leaving Meta. And I want to say that if we leave the platforms entirely, we are ceding. It's like almost like think about leaving the public square. And so it's only going to amplify other voices. And if there's so many of us on there posting and saying things, there's only so many of us they can shadow ban, or they'll shadow ban you, but not me. And then we'll take turns like being unshadowed or whatever that is. So I really think like, do not shy away from having conversations with people, not just online, but also in person. Like we really need to find ways to motivate people who for some reason did not vote or for whatever reason feel disenfranchised from the system to get in the fight with us and to get into the movement with us. Not because we think the system is perfect and doesn't need to be changed, but because there's a lot at stake for us to just think like, well, who's doing something? Well, it's us. Like we're the ones we've been waiting for. It's us. It's not going to be the Democratic Party. It's not going to be the other party. Like we have to really be the change we want to see. And as cheesy as that wants to be, and for you, it's like you do this podcast. There's going to be people everybody has a role in the movement. If you're a teacher, if you're a social worker, whatever you do, you have a role in the movement. If not everyone's going to be at the front of the protest or the march. Although if you want to, you should do that. I think we can all be community organizers and we can all speak to the issues that we care about with passion, and that is going to translate to everybody.
I love that. Everybody's got a role to play. Thank you so much. That's very sweet. That's a very sweet note to end it on. Thank you for being a longtime supporter and friend of this pod. Absolutely love all the work that you do. And of course, where can people follow you? Where's the best place to stay in contact with you?
So I have, I'm always on Instagram, Betsy Aimee Cardenas. My business website, if you want to learn more about what I do, borninjunecreative.com. I have a Substack, so you can subscribe on my Instagram to that. My goal is to take my own advice and start putting more of my writing out there over the next few months. So hopefully I'll see you on the internet.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. We'll see you on the internet. And yes, by the way, folks, if anybody needs like incredible graphics, incredible campaign support, incredible just like direction, hit up Born in June, which is Betsy's shop.
Thank you, Brenda.
All right, take care.
I didn't even pay you to say that. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Ciao.
Thanks. Bye.
Tamarindo Podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Delsy Sandoval. We are also the show's executive producers. Jeff Ricards wrote our theme song. Sonoro Media's Karina Riveroll provides production support, and Cliva Torres edits our episodes for YouTube. The best way to support our work is to rate and review Tamarindo or share an episode with a friend. Get in touch with us at tamarindopodcast.com.
Sonoro.
En los viernes de papitas gratis, llévate unas papitas medianas con una compra mínima de $1 en el app de McDonald's y guarda esa reserva secreta para después, como en 2 minutos. Pa. Válida los viernes una vez al día hasta el 12:30 y 1:25 McDonald's participantes. Excluye impuestos. Debes haberte registrado en Rewards.